too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. You ever have that sinking feeling, like you're moving through life, doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, bumping into the same problems, but you can't quite explain why you feel stuck? I've been there. And if I'm honest, I didn't even know I was stuck for a long time. I thought life was just hard. I thought people were unfair. I thought maybe I was just unlucky or not built for something better. But over time, painfully, slowly, I realized it wasn't the world holding me back. It was me, my habits, my patterns, my blind spots. It was the way I kept tripping over the same invisible wire and blaming the floor. There's this quote I read once that hit me right in the gut. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's Carl Jung. And when I first read those words, it felt like someone had cracked open my skull and shined a flashlight on everything I didn't want to see. Not because I was evil or broken, but because I was asleep, sleepwalking through my own damn life. It's easy to think stupidity means a low IQ or being bad at math or something. But I've come to understand it as something else entirely, a stubborn refusal to see, a deep resistance to change, a quiet, self-defeating loop of behaviors that keeps us trapped in the same situations over and over. And the scariest part? We often don't even know it's happening. We just call it bad luck, or that's just the way I am. I used to catch myself getting frustrated at other people, bosses who didn't get me, friends who didn't support me, partners who never understood me. But looking back, I see how often I was blind to my own role in the drama. How I sabotaged opportunities, how I resisted feedback, how I clung to the familiar even when it hurt. There was one year, I remember it vividly, when I hit the same wall in 3 different areas of my life. My job felt suffocating. My relationship was crumbling. My health was in shambles. And every time I thought I'd figured it out, I'd find myself back in the same emotional ditch weeks later. It wasn't until I sat down, exhausted and raw, and asked myself the scariest question I'd ever asked. What if I'm a common denominator? That question tore through me. It wasn't self-blame. It was deeper. It was self-confrontation. I realized I had been living inside a story, a carefully constructed narrative where I was always the misunderstood hero and the world was always the villain. But that story wasn't helping me. It was keeping me small. And the thing is, I wasn't doing it on purpose. None of us are. These patterns start early. Maybe it's something we learned in childhood. How to survive, how to be seen, how to protect ourselves from pain. Maybe we grew up in homes where admitting you were wrong meant punishment. So we learned to double down instead of reflect. Maybe we had to be the strong one, the perfect one, the funny one. And we got so good at playing that role, we forgot it was just a role. But the truth is, those patterns that once protected us eventually become our prison. They keep us from growing. They keep us from changing. They keep us from connecting. And worst of all, they keep us from knowing who we really are. I remember one day, I snapped at someone I cared about over something small like a forgotten message. And afterward, I sat alone in my room, sick with guilt, and I whispered, "Why do I always do this?" Not in anger, in despair. And that moment, that quiet, trembling moment, was the beginning of something new. Because for once, I didn't justify it. I didn't blame on a bad day or on someone else. I just sat with the question. I let it break me open. And maybe that's where real change starts. Not with grand declarations or New Year's resolutions, but with quiet moments of brutal honesty. With looking at ourselves not to shame or punish, but to understand. To see what's been hiding in plain sight. I wish someone had told me earlier that being stuck doesn't mean you're broken. It means there's something you haven't yet seen. And once you do, everything can begin to shift, slowly, painfully, beautifully. But first, you have to be willing to look. Not outside, but in. And that's the hardest part, isn't it? Looking inward. It's so much easier to blame the world, to stay numb, to keep doing what we've always done. But that road only loops back on itself. It never leads anywhere new. So if you've ever felt like your life is on repeat, if you've ever whispered "not again" to yourself after messing up for the 100th time, I just want to say, you're not crazy and you're not alone. You're probably just on the edge of something real, something raw, something honest. And I promise, on the other side of that honesty, there's freedom. There's a strange kind of confidence that comes with knowing just enough to sound smart, but not enough to actually understand. I've worn that mask before, too many times if I'm being real. I'd skim an article, hear a podcast clip, or read a bold quote on Instagram, and suddenly feel like I'd uncovered the truth about life, politics, psychology, you name it. And because it felt good, because it stroked my ego, I'd talk like I knew what I was saying. But here's the dangerous part. When you build your identity around shallow certainty, you stop asking questions. You stop listening. You stop learning. And you don't even notice it happening because everything around you, the people you follow, the content you consume, the feedback loops of your digital world, reinforces that illusion. It's like living in a hall of mirrors where every reflection agrees with you. That's what scared me the most once I started waking up. Not how much I didn't know, but how deeply I believed I did. I had to confront the fact that I wasn't curious anymore. I was defensive. I wasn't seeking growth. I was seeking confirmation. And that's a trap. A cozy, self-congratulatory trap. Have you ever caught yourself scrolling through social media? Not because you're learning, but because you want to feel right? You want to hear people echo your opinions, validate your pain, justify your perspective. I used to think that was harmless. Now I see it's one of the most subtle forms of self-destruction because it feeds your pride while starving your soul. I remember a conversation that changed me. A friend, one of the few who doesn't sugarcoat things, gently said, "You speak so confidently about things you've never lived." It hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to pull out references and quotes and reasons. But deep down, I knew they were right. I was performing knowledge, repeating things that made me sound insightful without ever wrestling with them in my real life. It's humbling to admit that. It's even harder to unlearn it, because unlearning demands silence. It demands listening. It demands saying, "I don't know," and meaning it. And for someone who's built their worth on being the one who does know, that's terrifying. But here's the gift hidden in that terror. The moment you stop pretending, you can start truly growing. The moment you let go of being right, you make space to be transformed. I began to notice how often my false confidence came from fear. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of being exposed as not enough. Fear that if I didn't have the answers, I wouldn't be valuable. So I clung to surface-level knowledge like a shield. But it was a brittle shield, and it kept me from deeper conversations, deeper connections, deeper understanding. There's a line I come back to often. Pride is concerned with who is right. Humility is concerned with what is right. And when I started shifting from pride to humility, even just a little, I began to see how much I'd missed, how much I'd misunderstood, and how much beauty there was in being teachable. We live in a world that worships the appearance of knowing. Hot takes, strong opinions, instant judgments, they get rewarded. But real wisdom is quiet. It listens more than it speaks. It asks before it answers. And it doesn't need to prove anything. I'm still learning how to live that way. I still catch myself reaching for the comfort of certainty. But now I pause. I breathe. I ask myself, do you really understand this? Or are you just afraid of not having something to say? And sometimes I sit in the silence instead, because I've learned that silence is where the real answers begin to form. Not the loud, performative kind, but the kind that grows roots in your soul. The kind that changes how you live, not just how you talk. So if you've ever felt the pressure to seem smart, to always have a take, to be the one who knows, I get it. I really do. But there's something even stronger than being right, being open. And maybe that's where wisdom begins, not with the right answer, but with the right question honestly asked. There was a time in my life when I thought being emotional meant being alive, that feeling things intensely was a sign of depth. and maybe in some ways it is. But what I didn't realize back then was that I wasn't just feeling my emotions, I was ruled by them. They ran the show. They made the decisions. And when things went sideways, I always had a reason outside myself. Stress, betrayal, disrespect, bad timing, unfair treatment. But here's what life eventually taught me. If your emotions are driving the car, they'll eventually crash it. I'm not proud of how many moments I lost to emotional chaos. I've burned bridges, ended opportunities, and hurt people I cared about, all because I couldn't sit with discomfort without acting on it. I'd lash out when I felt cornered. I'd retreat when I felt rejected. I'd overcompensate when I felt unseen. And in all of it, I believed I was just being real or true to myself. But that wasn't truth. That was impulse dressed up as authenticity. Looking back, I see the patterns clearly. I'd enter conflict not to understand, but to win. I'd hear criticism as a threat, not a chance to grow. And worst of all, I'd treat every emotional storm like it deserved a reaction, like it was my job to obey whatever I felt in the moment. That's not freedom. That's slavery to your own nervous system. No one ever told me that emotional intelligence wasn't just about having emotions. It was about holding them, about breathing through them, about creating space between stimulus and response. And that space, that's where all the power is. It's easy to confuse emotional expression with emotional maturity. But there's a difference between being open and being volatile, between being honest and being unfiltered. And I had to learn that the hard way. There was this one relationship I really messed up. Not because I didn't love the person, but because I didn't know how to regulate myself. The moment I felt misunderstood or dismissed, I'd shut down or explode. I thought love was supposed to fix that. I thought if they really cared, they'd know how to handle me. But the truth is, no one can manage your emotions for you. That's your job. That's your responsibility. And until you accept that, you'll keep expecting other people to do what only you can. I remember one fight, loud, raw, messy, and afterward I sat in the quiet, shaking, drained, ashamed. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I didn't trust myself. Not really. Not in the heat of the moment. And that lack of trust, that fear of my own reactions, bled into everything. Into work, into friendships, into the way I talked to myself. That's when I knew I had to change, not just for others, but for me, because I couldn't keep living in fear of my own emotional wake. I couldn't keep confusing intensity with strength. Real strength is staying grounded when everything in you wants to erupt. It's choosing clarity over chaos. And listen, I'm not perfect at it. Sometimes I still feel that surge, the burning in the chest, the tightness in the throat, the urge to react. But now I breathe. I pause. I ask, what's really happening here? What's the truth under the trigger? And more often than not, the truth is that I'm scared, or hurt, or feeling unseen. And when I name it, it loses its power. When I sit with it, it starts to shift. This isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about respecting them without surrendering to them. It's about being the container, not the contents. And that takes practice. It takes patience. It takes compassion, especially for the parts of you that learn to react because it once kept you safe. So if you've ever felt like your emotions are too much, if you've ever hurt someone in a moment you didn't mean to, I just want you to know you're not broken. You're just untrained. And you can learn. You can grow that muscle. You can become someone you trust in any emotional storm. And when you do, you'll start to feel something you might not have felt in a long time. Peace. Not numbness. Not control. Just a steady, grounded presence inside you. A self that doesn't need to yell or run or collapse. A self that simply is calm, clear, awake. That's what I'm reaching for every day. Not perfection, but presence. Not silence, but stability. Not a life without emotion, but a life where emotion is honored, not obeyed. Because in the end, emotional maturity isn't about never feeling triggered. It's about not letting the trigger pull you. One of the hardest pills I've ever had to swallow was this. The people I kept around me said a lot more about me than about them. For the longest time, I surrounded myself with folks who felt safe. Not safe in the good way, like emotionally mature or lovingly honest, but safe in the comfortable way. People who wouldn't challenge me, who wouldn't ask me hard questions, who would nod along to my excuses, validate my limitations, and help me pretend that the patterns I was repeating were just bad luck or other people's fault. And here's the thing, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I thought I was choosing loyalty, familiarity, people who got me. But what I was actually doing was building a bubble, an echo chamber of sameness, where no one ever held up a mirror to my face. And when someone did try, I pushed them away. Too critical, too intense. They don't understand me, but they did. I just wasn't ready to hear it. It's uncomfortable to admit that you've outgrown people, or worse, that you chose them not because of who they were, but because of who you were afraid to become. When you're insecure, you don't want people who challenge you. You want people who let you stay small without making you feel small. There was a point when I looked around and realized that the people I spent the most time with had one thing in common. They were stuck. Stuck in jobs they hated but refused to leave. Stuck in cycles of gossip, blame, emotional avoidance. Stuck in lives they'd long ago stopped trying to improve. And the scary part? I didn't just tolerate it. I fit there. It's not that they were bad people. They were just mirrors. Mirrors for the part of me that was scared to grow. Scared to risk being the weird one who wanted more. Scared to become someone their comfort couldn't follow. And the truth is, growth is lonely at first. Because when you start healing, evolving, and seeing more clearly, you often have to walk away from the very people who made you feel safe in your dysfunction. You start craving depth, truth, accountability, and suddenly the small talk, the complaints, the endless distraction, it feels suffocating. I remember when I began shifting my inner circle. It wasn't dramatic. No big fights, no declarations. Just a quiet distancing. I stopped replying right away. I started saying no more. I spent more time alone, more time reading, reflecting, sitting in silence. And slowly, the noise around me faded. That noise I used to call friendship. What was left were a few rare souls who didn't just tolerate my growth. They expected it. These were people who called me out gently, but firmly. Who asked questions that made me think, not just feel. Who celebrated my efforts more than my outcomes. Who reminded me that I could do hard things, not by cheering from the sidelines, but by walking beside me when it got messy. It was humbling. It still is. Because being around people who are wiser, more disciplined, more self-aware, it exposes you. It reveals your excuses. It makes you uncomfortable in all the right ways. But that discomfort, that's where growth lives. If your circle always agrees with you, if no one ever challenges your assumptions, if every conversation leaves you feeling validated but never expanded, ask yourself, is this friendship or codependency? I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because I've lived it. I've clung to relationships that were built on shared wounds rather than shared visions. Trauma bonds disguised as loyalty. People who loved the old version of me so much, they couldn't accept the person I was becoming. And sometimes the hardest part of growth isn't what you learn, it's what you have to let go of. The old crowd, the familiar patterns, the version of you that needed them. But what you make room for in that space, it's worth everything. Because when you surround yourself with people who elevate you, something inside shifts. You start thinking differently, dreaming bigger, speaking more carefully. You stop tolerating mediocrity in yourself and in others. Not from judgment, but from alignment. You want to rise because they remind you it's possible. So if you feel like your environment is holding you back, like your circle doesn't reflect your potential, trust that feeling. It's not ego. It's your soul asking for more. And don't be afraid to stand alone for a while. That space, that solitude, it's sacred. It's where your new self gets built. Because the people meant for you, the ones who truly see you, challenge you, grow with you, they don't keep you small. They help you rise. There was a period in my life when I couldn't go 10 minutes without reaching for something. My phone, a snack, a drink, a distraction, anything. I wasn't bored. I was avoiding. Avoiding silence, avoiding myself. I'd scroll for hours, jumping from one dopamine hit to the next. Reels, memes, headlines, meaningless chatter. I told myself it was relaxing, normal, just how people unwind now. But somewhere deep down I knew I wasn't resting. I was numbing. It's a terrifying thing when you realize you've built an entire lifestyle around avoiding discomfort. I didn't want to feel lonely, so I swiped endlessly through dating apps. I didn't want to feel failure, so I drowned myself in entertainment. I didn't want to feel pressure, so I procrastinated and then rushed things last minute, convincing myself I worked better under stress. Lie after lie, all of it noise to keep me from sitting still long enough to hear the truth. I was lost. The thing is, comfort looks harmless, even attractive. A cozy night in, a drink to take the edge off, a binge watch to disconnect. But when comfort becomes the default, when it becomes the escape hatch you use to avoid every uncomfortable thought or feeling, it becomes a prison. And the walls of that prison are soft, padded with notifications, junk food, late-night messages, and hollow validation. You don't even realize you're trapped until years go by and nothing in your life has changed, except the weight on your body, the fatigue in your spirit, and the ache in your chest that won't go away. I used to think growth was about adding things, skills, goals, affirmations. But real growth? It's about subtraction. It's about noticing what you've been feeding yourself that keeps you numb, and then, slowly, painfully, choosing differently. I had to confront how often I chose short-term pleasure over long-term peace. How often I traded real connection for virtual attention. How often I said, I deserve this, when what I really meant was, I don't want to feel. I remember one night, sitting alone in the dark after another mindless scroll session, feeling completely hollow. No joy, no rest, just noise in my brain and a familiar heaviness in my chest. And it hit me, this isn't restlessness. This is grief. Grief for the time I've wasted. For the moments I could have used to grow, reflect, breathe, be. That night, I deleted every app that fed the cycle. No big announcement, no dramatic farewell, just silence. And in that silence, I started hearing things again. My thoughts, my fears, my dreams, my pain. It wasn't easy, still isn't. There are days I crave the noise, the rush, the numbness. But now I know what's on the other side of those cravings. Nothing. Just more of the same. More emptiness dressed up as entertainment. What I've learned is this. Discomfort isn't the enemy. Discomfort is the invitation. It's your soul's way of getting your attention. It says, something isn't right here. Look closer. And the more you run from it, the louder it gets, until it erupts as anxiety, burnout, depression, disconnection. We're not meant to be constantly stimulated. We're not wired to consume endlessly. We're meant to digest our experiences, reflect on them, let them shape us. But that only happens in stillness. And stillness is only possible when you stop running. I'm not anti-pleasure. I'm not saying throw your phone into the ocean or become a monk. I'm saying pay attention. Watch what you reach for when you're tired, stressed, lonely. Watch what you chase when you're empty. And ask yourself, is this nourishing me or numbing me? Because every time you choose comfort over growth, you cast a vote for the life you don't want. And over time, those votes add up. They become your story. But here's the beautiful part. Every moment is a new choice. Every craving is a chance to pause and ask, what do I really need right now? Maybe it's water. Maybe it's a walk. Maybe it's a journal and a good cry. Maybe it's nothing at all. Just stillness, just breath, just presence. That's where life lives. Not in the next notification, not in the next scroll, but in the quiet moments you once tried so hard to escape. So if you're tired of being tired, if you feel like life is passing by in a blur of distractions, I want you to know this. You're not weak. You're just human, and you're waking up. And once you wake up, there's no going back. Only forward into something real. You know what's wild? Most of the biggest lessons I've learned in life didn't come wrapped in clarity or kindness. They came wrapped in pain, repetition, failure, shame, the stuff I wanted to avoid the most. That's where the wisdom was hiding. But for a long time, I didn't see it that way. I saw pain as punishment. I saw failure as a personal flaw. I saw every hard moment as evidence that I was broken, unlucky, or just not cut out for this whole life thing. I didn't realize pain was actually trying to teach me something. I just wanted it to stop. So I distracted myself, blamed others, denied the patterns. And every time things fell apart again, I'd ask, why does this keep happening to me? as if life was out to get me. It wasn't. Life was just holding up the same mirror over and over, hoping I'd finally look. There's a quote. I don't remember who said it, but it stuck with me. You'll keep experiencing the same lesson in different forms until you learn it. And man, did that hit hard. Because once I really looked back, I could see the cycle so clearly. Same kind of relationship, same kind of emotional crash, same self-sabotage right before I'd get close to something meaningful. Over and over, like clockwork. It wasn't life being unfair. It was me, playing out the same story because I hadn't stopped to rewrite the script. And that realization, it hurt, but also cracked something open in me. I started asking different questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But what is this trying to show me? Not, how do I make this go away? But what part of me still needs to heal? That shift changed everything. Because suddenly, pain wasn't the enemy. It was information. It was feedback. It was a flashlight shining on the parts of me I'd buried under pride, fear, distraction, and ego. I remember one particular failure. A project I poured my heart into that completely tanked. I was embarrassed, angry. I wanted to disappear. But after a few days of sulking and blaming the world, I did something different. I sat down and asked, okay, what did I miss? What did I ignore? What truth did I avoid? And the answer was clear. I hadn't listened. To the feedback, to my gut, to the signs that I was forcing something instead of building it with intention. That failure wasn't about the outcome. It was about the approach. And in that moment, I got better, wiser. Not because I succeeded, but because I reflected. See, reflection is what turns pain into wisdom. Without it, we just repeat the same suffering. With it, we grow. Slowly, yes. Imperfectly, absolutely. But we grow. And that's what separates people who evolve from people who stay stuck. It's not who gets hurt and who doesn't. It's who's willing to learn from the hurt instead of running from it. Now, I won't lie. This kind of inner work isn't sexy. It doesn't get applause. It won't show up in your highlight reel. But it's the most powerful kind of transformation there is. Quiet, deep, rooted. It looks like asking, what's my role in this pattern? Instead of who's to blame. It looks like choosing to journal through the shame instead of numbing it with distractions. It looks like reaching out for help. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to stop pretending you've got all together. And over time, something incredible starts to happen. You begin to trust yourself again. Not because you avoid mistakes, but because you learn from them. You start showing up to life with more presence, more humility, more peace. You stop fearing discomfort and start welcoming it. Not in a masochistic way, but in a mature, grounded way that says, I'm here for this. Even hard stuff, especially the hard stuff. That's when life gets real. That's when growth stops being this abstract idea and becomes a lived experience. One breath, one moment, one honest conversation at a time. So if you're in a painful season right now, if things keep falling apart or looping or testing you, pause. Don't just push through. Don't just numb it out. Ask the hard questions. Look for the patterns. Be brutally honest, but also deeply kind. Because the lesson isn't here to shame you. It's here to free you. And the more you lean into that truth, the more you'll realize. Life isn't punishing you. It's inviting you to rise. There's this quiet moment that comes after the chaos, after the pain, after the self-confrontation. A moment when you realize you're no longer reacting to life the way you used to. You don't explode like before. You don't spiral as quickly. You don't hide as deeply. It's not that you're perfect, you're far from it. But something inside you has shifted. And that shift, that's power. Not the loud, dominating kind. Not the kind that demands attention or seeks applause. I'm talking about real power. The kind that lives in self-awareness, in emotional regulation, in quiet clarity. That's what I've been learning and unlearning piece by piece. That the goal isn't to be right, it's to be aligned. It's not about having control over others. It's about having control over yourself. Your mind, your choices, your direction. And it's in that space between impulse and response, between thought and action, that you start designing a different kind of life. A life with discipline, with integrity, with depth. For the longest time, I thought success came from talent or hustle or even luck. But now I see it differently. Success, real success, the kind that brings peace, comes from discipline, from doing the work when no one's watching, from keeping your word to yourself, from showing up even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you'd rather escape. It's making the hard decision today that your future self will thank you for tomorrow. It's choosing to be around people who challenge you, not flatter you. People who tell you the truth, not just what's easy to hear. People who stretch your vision, who call out your greatness, who won't let you shrink just because it's comfortable. It's waking up early to read instead of scrolling. Saying no to temporary pleasure because you're building long-term joy. Having a hard conversation instead of avoiding it. Pausing before you react. Reflecting after you fail. That's not just maturity. That's mastery. And the more I practice it, the more I realize something important. This kind of life isn't exclusive. It's not reserved for the chosen few. It's available to anyone who's willing to choose it. Over and over again, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. Because intelligence isn't fixed. It's not a score. It's not a label. It's a choice, a daily decision to grow, to learn, to evolve. And stupidity? That's a choice too. It's the decision to stay asleep, to stay stuck, to keep doing the same thing while expecting different results. You don't have to live that way. Not anymore. You can break the cycle. You can step out of the fog. You can start becoming someone you trust. Someone who leads their life instead of being led by it. And I'm not saying it's easy. This road asks everything from you. It asks for your ego, your comfort, your excuses. But it gives you something far more precious in return. Yourself. The real you. The one beneath the pain, the noise, the masks. The one who's been quietly waiting for you to show up fully. So if you've made it this far, if you've read these words and felt them, I want to tell you something simple and true. You're not average. You're not hopeless. You're not too late. You're becoming. And becoming takes courage. So keep going. Keep choosing growth. Keep being honest even when it hurts. Keep investing in the quiet work no one sees. Because every small shift matters. Every choice to reflect instead of react, to listen instead of defend, to rise instead of retreat, it all adds up. That's how transformation happens. Not in one big moment, but in 1,000 quiet ones. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look in the mirror and see someone different. Not someone new, but someone true. Someone who didn't settle for comfort. Someone who faced the hard stuff. Someone who built a life and a self worth trusting. Someone free. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.